Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs.
Because Zoom is limiting us, and since we haven't changed to something for which we're paying, we should get going. How are you? And have you done any gaming since last we talked a few weeks ago?
Well, yeah, because I've played more. We've been carrying on through our ISS Vanguard game. We had a very emotional session like this. I mean, it does borderline role playing. So we were playing this thing where we'd had sent these guys down to the planet. This like our third mission, and then inadvertently triggered like this volcanic eruption was going to happen. We had not so many turns, but there was a time tracker, and the time tracker was slowly moving. And then we unleashed this virus, which meant our guides were going to have to quarantine if we didn't stop it. We managed to stop the virus. I got my two characters back to the shuttle, and then we realized that we could either take off, which just kills anyone who's left on the planet. That's what the rules say. Or we could wait another 2 rounds to see if Scott and Brian could get their two characters back to the ship. And they both kind of went, no, leave me. So you then literally have to take those characters and put them in a separate folder, which has the in memoriam basically wall of dead people thing. So we were really gutted. So because if it is a board game, it does have those kind of elements to it. It was like, no, leave me, I will be fine. So yeah, that was good. How about you?
Good. Well, we did another test run of my horror rules, and with some tweaks, and it's shaping up. I'm not going to share details so that I'm not going to share details right now. But there were some things that I wanted that I had to change with the core mechanics, some little tweaks, and we did a more robust test run of my investigation rules, the mechanic around investigations and it being question-based rather than role-based, which may sound kind of silly right now, but more detail in the future. And it worked. And there we go. And so yeah, that was good. And I think that we're going to be able to get the band back together for Castles and Crusades Kingmaker this weekend after 2 months. I have to go. Honestly, I went back and I read my notes. I am almost.
You need to listen to the episode. We did an episode on restarting a campaign.
I don't remember where. I remember where we were. I don't remember where we were headed. And
ask the players.
Frankly, I need to go read the rules again because I was like, does anyone remember how to play this game? And that was only like half serious or half joking rather. But that's life. No big deal. And that has no bearing on our important topic today that actually its genesis comes from me being a little cranky about something. Gee, big surprise. But you put a more positive spin on it. At least I took it that way. We want to talk about the importance of art, how iconic and how important art is as a part of this tabletop RPG hobby. So we're going to talk not necessarily, we're not doing a history of art. We're talking about the importance of art, the centrality of art in books and other publications. In these games, and I'm going to point out, I think we'll end up pointing out some like iconic and I know it sounds kind of corny, but I'd say like important artists from the genre. So where do you want to start?
Oh, I was curious why I know why you started this, but I haven't looked at the art for the current stuff. But yeah, you've said that. But I think there's one really important thing just before we go any further is that there is actually a difference between the art on the front, like the cover art, which both of us have gone for. I think yours is cover art as well, because I saw that picture.
It is.
The difference between cover art and inside art. Now, in some cases, like there's some artists who literally just do cover art. And then there's artists who do everything. But then there's other games where, so I'll give you one example of a game where the cover art is just nothing, but it's the art inside. So, and that would be a lot of Vampire the Masquerade. Yep. I'm thinking second edition, because I don't know if the art's the same, whatever. But because I was going back today and listening to some old episodes of ours, and in it I mentioned one of these artists I had to look up at the time, and this guy called Tim Bradstreet. Now he only seems to do sort of like almost pencil art. It's all just black and white. So there's a lot of his stuff in Shadowrun. There's a lot of his stuff in things like Vampire, and it's very, very characterful. It gives you a really good idea of what the world's meant to be like. But but the cover of those books is now, I mean, literally the front cover of some of Vampire, I think, which is kind of that green marble thing and a rose. That's it. So you're not going to see that and go, "Ooh, that makes me want to play that game." It might make you want to go, "I want to study what's inside." But the art inside those books,
different.
Yeah. So, but there's a perfect example of the difference between, like, cover art and inside. I think a lot of the other art we're probably talking about is cover art. Primarily, I think, because cover art gets to be bigger. You take a whole page, maybe 2 pages, big splash piece of art, and then you can really be evocative of what the game's going to be like, and you've got more real estate to work with. You don't tend to see that so much. Some games will have it inside, but I mean, as a short version, I think art's super important, to the extent that we've had this conversation about the AI stuff, but different conversation. But I am put off by black and white books. There's definitely, again, listening back to the previous episode, one of my criticisms of, say, GURPS was the GURPS books they're not nice to look at, and therefore I'm not drawn into them. And because I'm not drawn in, I am switched off. I feel like I'm looking at a textbook. Role playing books.
Yeah, it feels more like, that's a really good point. Those books feel more like functional text in like you're reading an instruction manual. Or if you open up old SPI or Avalon Hill war games from the 70s and 80s, I mean, it's like a technical manual for your stereo receiver. It's very dry, it's very functional, it's very concrete, and the only art might be like a sample of like a map and how counters are moved. Yeah, there's no story that it's seeking to evoke. And I think you make a really good point. I hadn't thought about this, but the differentiation between the how important cover art is versus interior art. And your classic age of White Wolf really kind of threw that on its head, because all the cover art did was establish a kind of a mood. And
it's like the werewolf's just some slashes. That's
yeah. No, it gave you one thing. Like the idea of the rose and the green marble to me says funerary. It says death. And then you have the other one with the tear there. Okay, great. So it evokes one thing or implies one thing. But then throughout you have that. I mean, that Tim Bradstreet, his art is so central to the look and the feel of Vampire in terms of communicating it. But that's an outlier in terms of the cover and the not saying that the cover in the interior, like the quality or the emphasis is inverted, but that in basically every other role-playing game, it's the cover that's meant to draw you in. Something that's interesting, I just realized, I believe that all of the art, if you're listening, you obviously aren't seeing this, but all of the art we have as our wallpaper, our background right now, is Larry Elmore.
Yes.
All of it. I have the background to the original Star Frontiers basic set, and you've got the basic expert, companion, master, and immortals rule cover box.
I'll move further in front of immortals because that won't make our point very well.
Yeah. But I think that's all. I believe all of that. I know at least 4 of those. I don't know about the immortals one, but that's all Larry Elmore. And little side note, I am not an artist person. That is, I know precious few artists by name. Yeah. And so the ones, if I name drop in this episode, it is because those are pretty much the only artists that I know of in like role-playing game art. I'm not like a comic book person who knows like all the different artists and things like that. But let's go back. I mean, the art, I think the most important thing, especially in fantasy and science fiction games, maybe less so in contemporary settings or settings that are in more real worlds, but especially fantasy, the art is critical because you're creating a made-up world.
Yeah.
And you have to communicate in some way, shape, or form to consumers, what does this world look like? No amount of text can describe what a single picture can do. That's what a dragon looks like. You know, that's what a warrior looks like. You know, that's what this kind of spaceship looks like. No amount of explanation can do that. So I think that role-playing game art it bears a burden that is special because of what it's meant to communicate, what it can communicate.
I think right, and we've only done art once before, and I said I wanted to come back to it, but we never did. But we're doing it now. So when you suggest, when you said what you wanted to talk about, I was like, no. And then you said we can talk about art, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do that because I want to do art for a while. I mean, to me, there's different kind. Art, if we're going to go cover art, because it's the easiest place to start. Cover art, I think, should to some extent should tell a story. You should be able to look at the picture, and it should tell you a story, and that story should also tell you what kind of game you are looking at. And internal art doesn't need to, because sometimes, you know, what I like to see, and internally, I want to see art that either, again, does the story thing, or I want to see art that is showing me what like a species looks like, or a race or whatever, or what a ship looks like, or what a location looks like. So I don't always need the interior art to tell a story. Where I do struggle is if there is like no interior art. Because it's I need to know if it's a world that I don't know. Like Star Wars is fine. I could have a blank Star Wars book, it could be boring, but I already know what everything looks like in Star Wars, and to some extent Star Trek. You know, so an established property, you don't necessarily need it. But if it's like you said, absolutely nailed it, a fantasy world, or if it was something like Traveller, which is again made up sci-fi world, you need that art because that's the thing that lets you see it. And as much as you can describe what something looks like, it's, you know, the picture tells 1,000 words. It's so much easier to go, here's the pic. This is what it looks like. And
that's a really good point, because like fantasy, if you don't have a lot of art, my guess is in the Western world that there is a default view of fantasy. It's a, you know, Western European, you know, Middle Ages analog. You go to castles with round towers and drawbridges and crap like that, and so then it becomes potentially very bland.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that's unique, that's special to that. And I'll tell you that, and you mentioned AI a moment ago. That is a huge challenge for independent publishers like yours truly, with Eris, because I'm like okay with the art that I chose to put in there, which was all free use stuff. I'm okay with it. Some of it I like. None of it is customized. None of it actually is either my work, because I can't draw to friggin' save my life, or me sitting down with an artist and saying, you know, this is what an elf in Eris looks like. This is what a town looks like. Like I have the ideas. I've described some of this into like crummy AI art generators, and it spits out something. I'm like, that's kind of close. But in order to realize that vision, like you mean Space 1999, Traveller, Star Wars, Star Trek, they're all science fiction. They all have radically different feels because of, in part, how they look. They give you a different sense. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And that's a real challenge for an independent publisher, is that art piece, unless you are lucky enough that you're talented in the writing and the design and the art.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I mean, so we obviously have different view things. That art up there is, well, it probably doesn't help. There's not a decently high res picture. I imagine mine a small one, so it's not an issue.
You're pointing at the companion rules cover?
No, I was pointing up to you. Oh, sorry. It depends whether on my screen you're above me, because I prefer to do that, because otherwise I'm looking left and right. Looks weird. But yeah, I think it comes left and right. Yeah, so on your one, it's that's not Elmore's best stuff. I mean, this is the fancy art in front. That's what I grew up with, because that was what was on the front of the boxes, and then, you know, he did a bunch of Dragon magazine covers as well. So that was the extent of what I had at that. You know, I never bought a D&D until second edition. So I was buying, you know, I've got these things, and the art inside is nowhere like these art on the front cover. It's to my saying, it's what's called epic. You know, these are big, like cool things. You can see it's going to tell you. It's very, you know, it's not overly busy. It's got one, you know, in all of these, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. But some of the art he'd used to do on the front of Dragon magazines was amazing. Again, like, you know, one picture and literally tells a story. And that's what I want to see. I want to see something which is telling a story, which is, I suspect, maybe where you're going to have a thing later. Now, so Elmore's Elmore's the guy. When I was, so this is what, late 80s, Elmore was the guy, because he was doing this stuff. Now, modern days, there's another guy who you're not as keen on, and I think is amazing, which is Wayne Reynolds, which, if you don't know the name Wayne Reynolds, if you look at a Pathfinder book or anything in 4th edition D&D, that's probably Wayne Reynolds on the front cover. I mean, like, literally all of the what they call iconic characters, because they've done that in Pathfinding, rather than just having, you have the class. Every class has an iconic character, has a name and a backstory and everything else. He's done the art for all of them. He's done virtually all of the books for Pathfinder first, and I don't know how much of second, but definitely like the core books of 2nd edition. And again, I like his stuff because his stuff tells a story.
I will grant you that. Wayne Reynolds stuff, and again, this is me, the art critic, coming from the standpoint of being, stick people and blobs of color. Wayne Reynolds art, it to me, it has a bit of like an anime kind of vibe to it. Very sharp edges, strange asymmetrical, like chicken feather rooster thing haircuts and whatnot, gigantic 2-foot wide swords, the barbarian from Pathfinder.
Look at that.
No, I'm not talking about a long sword, like that gigantic, ridiculously long sword where the knight is wielding on the cover of the companion rule set.
That's companion. He's like, that guy's like level 15 or something.
I'm talking about a sword that's so wide it makes a cricket bat look like a butter knife. That's what I'm talking about. But Wayne Reynolds' art is, there's something it's just not my thing. Now, you are correct.
On the core rule. Yeah, what I was going to say, on the core rule book of Path, the first edition, I think on some of his later art and a lot of his 4th edition stuff, some of it's a bit too busy.
That's the same word I was going to use.
Too many things on it, or there's too many characters. And the classic one, like, the characters all have too many pouches and too many belts.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, I think to some extent it's become a meme that, like, that his characters will have excessive amounts. It's an excessive amount of detail.
Pathfinder 1st edition Rogue and Artificer. Like, you cannot have enough buckles. You cannot have. It's like weird, like naughty pilgrim chic kind of thing going on.
And that doesn't bother me, but it's almost like, it's a bit silly. It's gone, it's too far. Yeah, I see what you mean. Because I look at that, I thought, well, that's not anime art, because anime art tends to be more cartoony. But in the sense of, like, the extreme hair, like the aesthetic of it has this kind of over the top aesthetic, like the crazy hair and the.
And I think a big difference in looking at Elmore's art, for example, on those 5 original boxed sets from the 80s, the big difference. There's high action. There is a story. I think in every single one of those, and I'll just throw this out there as like, these are the indicators of good RPG art for me. Is there has to be action, or there has to be, actually, maybe there doesn't have to be action, but I'll come back to, there has to be a story. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, I'm looking at something that either something is about to happen, something is happening, or something just happened. There's a big story going on here. And there has to be some degree of focus. And when I'm looking at the cover of the basic rules box where the one fighter is lunging forward and there's that red dragon about to bite at its sword, or the guy is on the horse that's rearing up on the expert rule set, the focus is, that's where Wayne Reynolds, I think, actually is I don't like his stuff as much, because you're right, it's too busy. There's so much going on. Give me focus. Like the original AD&D Player's Handbook is a classic example of the something just happened. Like, who are these people in this temple? Whose temple is it? What's the deal with these like dead lizard things and stuff like that? What just happened? Oh, and what's still happening? The dudes are up there prying the eye out of that idol. There's a story that's going on, and the story either points to or points back from something adventurous. and all like the art that's behind me, the Larry Elmore's cover for Star Frontiers. It's these three adventurers, and they're on like a hill, and they're armed, and like you're looking at them, and there's this crashed spacecraft behind them that's like burning and all this stuff. So something just happened. They're all torn up and whatnot, and they're in the middle of the crap. So it calls for all these questions. What just happened? What's happening? Who are these people? And it's exciting, and it draws you in. And you even, you look interior art, you page through, you look at these kinds of things, and you go, like, I want to play that.
Yeah.
I want to play that. There is a picture in the original AD&D Monster Manual. It's a full page picture that's about 3/4 the way through the book, where it's this party of adventurers, just a black and white line drawing, party of adventurers, and they're going through this nasty cave, and there are giant spider webs all over the place. And up in the corner is this gigantic giant spider that looks like it's about to just lunge at them, and they don't appear to see it. And I'm like, oh, I love that, because it's like, who are these people, and what kind of crap are they about to get slapped with? So it calls for a story, and it asks you to, like, don't you want to be a part of this action or this activity, this story right here?
Yeah, I think definitely when it comes to, like I said, when it's like the big splash art, I want it to be like either this epic stuff, or I want it to be dynamic. Use the word action. So yeah, I'd say the same thing. If something's dynamic and it's telling a story, something like that. When it comes to interior stuff, like I said, I'm happy with just something that's showing a location. There's not necessarily, it doesn't have to tell you anything other than like, this is what something looks like.
Yeah.
But when it's character art, if it is telling you something, well, that's really cool. So I'll give you two examples, one game and a separate thing. I remember looking through a lot of part of the reason I did buy a lot of 4th edition books is actually the art in a lot of those 4th edition books was good. And that's back when we had still things like not prestige classes, but the classes you got when you got to like level 20, I know 20, I never did, but you look through the book and at level 10 and 20, you pick these other things.
Yeah, those things.
And they'd have a cool piece of art and you go, oh, I want to play that kind of, when I get to that tier, I want to play that because that looks really cool. That'll make a really cool character or a really cool NPC. So that kind of art's really cool. Oh, that guy, that's just a really cool outfit. And that's one of the reasons I always really got into League of Legends, because a lot of their art isn't necessarily telling a story. There's a thing called Legend of Runeterra, which is a card game version. Now, a lot of the time then there is telling a story there. It's more of like, it is trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
A lot of their character art is purely like, here's a character with a look like. But then they have to kind of give you an idea of like, this is why this character's cool. They want you to spend money to buy this character in the game. So, really cool character art can make you go, yeah, I want to play that character or that class or that race. So you can have things that don't have to story. So it has to be doing, again, I think it has to be dynamic. It's not just standing doing nothing interesting is boring. So things have to be doing something interesting, or there has to be a story, or there's got, that catch.
Yeah, there's an implication. I know that there's a piece of art, and I think it's in the AD&D, the original PHB, and it's these 4 adventurers, and they're standing around a table, and I think there's a map and there's some treasure on the table, and it's like a planning session. And that to me, again, there isn't action, but there's a story.
Yeah.
There's a story that's interesting, that again points to, in some way, shape, or form, adventure, the kind of adventure you want to have as a player when you play this game.
Yeah, over the years, as the art has progressed, I have become a bit more like an art whore. Like if I look at a book and if the art in a book is not very good, it will massively turn me off that.
Sure.
Which is silly, because I grew up with these things where, all of the interior art in these books was black and white. But nowadays I'm expecting like, full color interior art throughout. Well, partly because of the cost of the book. Some of these books aren't cheap. If you want me to drop a lot of money on a book, I want, the art inside to be worth it. And that's funny when we were talking about like vampire earlier, like the new vampire books, the art, it's almost not even art. It's like, it's scribbles, and it's like someone just did some stuff in Photoshop, and a lot of it's photos, which they then just messed with. And you're like, that's not telling me anything about vampires. It's not telling me what the different vampires are like, the different clans.
I wonder if that's a function, though, of your experience, because I feel the same way. But your experience with that absolutely outstanding Tim Bradstreet internal art, which just was so evocative of what they
possibly,
were trying
but,
to
I want the art to be, we've said we want the art to be telling us a story. If you look through the modern vampire books, there's no story. It's just, a lot of it's like normal people with then, they've done filters on it. I remember like the original Apocalypse World book. The art in that's terrible, but that's because the guy basically is, from what I understand, it looks like it's photos that he's taken of his mates and then they've put filters on. So you think, well, fair
Hey,
enough.
you got to
That
do
was
what you
like,
got to do, you know?
an indie thing, and therefore that's what he did. Right, we're going to do photos and then turn it into art. But Vampire the Masquerade is a big deal. I don't expect, it's like Shadowrun or something. I don't expect to buy one of these big iconic franchise books and it have some photos with some filters on the top of
Yeah.
it. I expect decent art in one of those books because the art draws you into the game. The art's the thing that's your gateway into these completely different worlds. And yeah, the most modern of Vampire is one that literally I remember looking through the art and being like,
Meh.
this is bad.
Yeah.
Like this is genuinely
Yeah, it's a weird
bad.
thing. Like, oh, and just before I forget, you found this article off someone's WordPress site where it lists a bunch of good classic, like from over the years, role-playing game artists. So I'll include that link in the show notes so you can take a look at some of these. But yeah, I agree, and there have been some games that I've gotten, some games that I have, that the art is really hit and miss, or there's a general style that the publisher has adopted that's like, I don't really like this. I don't really dig this all that much. Um, we have 11 minutes.
Mhm.
My original idea for this, and I've stayed out of this aside from one comment on X, one comment. There's
Oh,
been
that's where you
lots
went
of,
wrong.
huh?
That's where you went wrong. You were on X.
Yeah, really. It's just what a cesspool. There's been a lot of gnashing of teeth over the art for the forthcoming version of Dungeons and Dragons, and lots of people want to pick a fight on just about anything and everything that doesn't suit their fancy, and
So
I'm not going
out of
to.
curiosity, what? Because I'll be interested to hear what your
Sure.
opinion is. I've seen that like the new covers are out, and I've seen that like people want. I haven't read any of it, so I genuinely I don't know why people are unhappy. So what? Just for my and also our listeners if they haven't, what are people's what is the wisdom of the internet, which probably is wrong.
Okay,
What
yeah.
are people's issues with it, and then I'll hear your issues on it.
Okay, what I have heard, two say general categories. The art itself, the art itself. Hello, the art itself. That is not necessarily the quality of the art. Like, is this a well done picture per se? But what does the art do in terms of being like a cover? The cover for the player's handbook, the cover, the broad release covers for the three core books. That's drawn a lot of attention, and I think on the one side it's what kind of story, or is this evocative? Is this a good cover
Not
for
sure
this
there's a story.
iconic game? And then there's been some nitpicking about the actual art quality. I'm far less interested in that. I'm more interested in the feel that I get from those things. And then in the last like week or two, there's been a lot of grinding of teeth over releases from WOTC of interior art. Different art from the different races, different art showing different kinds of like scenes, the kinds of things that you and I have just talked about, like what's necessary for interior art. You do need some action, I think. But you also need images that convey what these races and what these creatures and what these places look like. What does a town look like? So we've seen a decent amount of art has come out from WOTC that are examples of those things. And there's been a ton of grinding of teeth over it, over what's depicted, how different races, species, heritage, whatever you're calling them this week, are depicted. And so I have my issue with the covers, but I also have maybe a surprising or different take on why I'm not happy with the direction that their art is taking, and which is really sad, because here's my thing. I've got Star Frontiers behind me. You've got D&D. D&D it's the flagship RPG. Its art sets the standard, or has set the standard, set the bar for RPG art, or at least has always been that thing that people have pointed back to. as being so iconic. And I think from
Yeah.
that standpoint, it's kind of important. So what do we think of the new D&D art? What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, because I'd seen the only one I'd actually really seen. I'm just going to look at the player's handbook now because what's in the current player's handbook?
Current
Yeah,
player's
I'd say
handbook is
fifth edition is not great.
no, it's not.
Yeah, okay. So
I actually think fourth edition and fifth edition, the fourth edition was clever because it had the connection between the three covers through the crystal ball and that. So that was kind of a clever Easter egg of sorts. But I think that fourth edition and fifth edition both suffer from what I would say all those covers strive. They try too hard to be too like awesome action, like over the top. They try too hard. And that's my main issue with these forthcoming is that
if I go back to these Dungeons and Dragon ones behind me, these are my pinnacle of what a D&D
yes,
thing should look like. They've already screwed it up in 5e because it's fighting a giant, not a frigging dragon for a start. Now the thing here, I remember I think I started reading something and someone was talking about, oh, they don't know what the gold dragon looks like. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna stop reading this because this is just gonna be yeah,
isn't it?
I'm with them. I don't like what this gold dragon looks like, but you know, dragons can look like different things. That's not the end of the world. This picture is not telling a story.
You're talking
Now,
about
actually,
the PHB cover.
I'm talking about the PHB.
Yeah, it
The
doesn't.
PHB actually, to me, looks like someone stuck a bunch of individual characters
Bingo.
on top of each other, stuck a dragon behind them, and actually at the side of this picture, there's what looks like a kobold flying onto the screen.
Yeah.
That no one is acknowledging because there's a fighter. There's two fighters in the front. There's what looks like a human female, and I can't tell what the guy's got a helmet on. So there's two fighters in the center. One of them is swinging their sword, but it doesn't actually make any sense. So this,
and by the way, the sword
is,
here's a nitpicky piece. The handle to the sword actually does not align with the blade of the sword. It doesn't look right.
Yeah, the consistency of this picture, which is I think why there was a lot. I remember like I did this why I read it, but people saying they wondered if this had been created with AI, and of course them saying, well, no, it hasn't. Yeah, I mean. Considering this is the new version of D&D, you would think you would go, right, we're going to spend a lot of time getting this right. Here's the remit to the artist. We want the artist. There is no story here.
Nope.
It just looks like a bunch of stuff thrown on space. The back cover's worse, though, because it took me about 5 attempts to realize they're meant to be sitting on the back of a dragon. I thought they were climbing up a cliff.
Yeah.
But that's also
yeah.
bad.
Here's what I see in these covers, all of them, because the DMG and the Monster Manual suffer from the same problem. It's a kitchen sink that is utterly devoid of a story. It's all these bits and pieces that it almost looks like, I mean, this is probably art by committee. It's a bunch of people sitting around and they checkboxed. Well, what do we need? What should we have there? Who needs to be like, okay, we need to have all these classes and we need to show all these things. And like they created something that has the bits and pieces but it's so much of a kitchen sink that it's just nothing. It's just nothing. And that's what I'm seeing in all of these covers. They're just, it's not the quality of the art, it's the lack of life in it. It's essentially it's
the layout. When someone's come up with how they're going to put this together and someone's done if you were drawing a piece of art like that, I'm guessing I'm not an artist, but if you were drawing a piece like that, you would draw out this guy's going to be here and this person's going to be here. And whoever's done that, I almost feel like it's exactly what you said. Oh, we need this, and this on it. But why are things facing in the wrong direction? No one's facing the dragon. No one's facing the things attacking them. Or that dwarf kind of.
Well, hell, the cover of the Monster Manual has the beholder in the background. The one dude is facing away from the beholder, and the magic using woman with the staff actually appears to be facing the guy's back.
I mean, that one again, I think I'm with you. Right, we need a wizard person. Oh, let's put him on a collapsing tower out of that
that's
bit
exciting.
in Lord of the
We've never
Rings.
seen that before.
The character is Minsk out of Minsk and Boo from Baldur's Gate because I can recognize his red thing down his throat, which means the blob next to him is a space hamster. And they've thrown some monsters on. So yeah, we can see it might be an ogre. That's a displacer beast. We've got
you have to have the now iconic
gelatinous cube.
You have the friggin' what's it called? The gelatinous cube.
Yeah,
you have all these things that
orcs,
make
skull thing.
No sense.
Well,
together.
I don't mind that one as much. That's like, look, there's a bunch of monsters and they're all surrounding the hero. So that one doesn't bother me as much. And at least the characters at the bottom are looking at the characters in the middle, and the beholder is looking, I'm being generous, down to the people.
Yeah,
the woman is looking at nothing. She is looking nowhere.
No.
So yeah, so that's not as bad as the player's handbook is terrible. There is no internal consistency in what is going on there. People are looking all over the place. The Monster Manual, I think, is bad. I really like the Dungeon Master's Guide, but funnily enough, because it's got Venger on it, so like instant win. There we go.
I guess
that's it. It doesn't matter. Also, that's the one that actually is internally consistent, because Venger's at the back. He's the boss guy. There's some other woman who's not as important. And then there's like the dude with the flaming sword who looks amazing, who's in front of them. And then there's some skeletons. So there's no story.
No.
But at least it had rule of cool there. The other ones, the player's handbook manages to fail everything. There is no story, and there is no rule of cool. So it's just, as you said it right. You said it's just nothing.
Yeah,
it's just some stuff on a page.
In trying to be everything, it is absolutely nothing. And that's where this Elmore art that's behind you, those box covers are so brilliant, because they are limited, and they are therefore focused, and therefore they can accomplish something. If you set out to do everything, you will do nothing.
Yeah,
and that is what they are attempting to do in these covers. I take issue. There are some nitpicky places where I take issue with the technical execution. I don't like that style of art. I like it better than the Wayne Reynolds stuff, but whatever. But yeah, it's devoid.
It's a weird style, isn't it?
All of them. You know, the Monster Manual, okay, it has monsters on the front of it. Look, and if anyone tells you that the cover of the original AD&D Monster Manual was an artistic, gem, is they're high, because that whole like over under like underground above ground thing is that is not a good piece of art. Okay, it is not. The original player's handbook is excellent, but the Monster Manual here, it just tells you, why don't they just have a bunch of tiles of monster faces? Why don't they make it look like a rogues gallery of monster faces? That would be about as much of a story.
I kind of feel I've got to the point now where their art isn't as important because people are going to buy it because it's D&D.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So they don't need the awesome art to sell their product.
Oh, away from the covers, the other issue is this released like interior art, like a bunch of dwarves working in a bakery, or working
because
in
dwarves
a
can only be in a mine,
serving each other scones. A bunch of orcs taking a happy walk on a Sunday afternoon, or something like that. People are taking issue with the stories and the depictions, and like how these different character types are being depicted, and here's my issue with those. I'm not going to get super nitpicky, but my issue is entirely story focused. None of that released interior art, none of it evokes any kind of adventure. In fact, I read someone comment rather, that it's been Disneyfied. Everybody's standing around smiling. The dwarves are serving each other scones or whatever. There's nothing about that art that I've seen that says danger, risk, adventure, mystery. It's all like bucolic, happy people standing around smiling, taking a walk, happy fantasy people in, varied settings, a whole bunch of different folks all together looking happy and joyful together. I hate to break it to you, if everybody is happy and joyful and there is no risk of like some kind of Robert E. Howard style, baddies coming in and ruining their day and slaughtering half the happy people and eating their scones, there's no adventure. And I'm seeing this interior art that offers like this bucolic kind of idyllic, happy. There's no reason to go adventuring if your scones are warm and everyone's smiling at you and everything's home and hearth. I don't know what the hell WOTC is thinking.
I think it's really hard to judge a handful of interior art pieces until the whole book's out.
It's true.
The covers are different.
What the rest of it is like.
You can make a judgment on the covers because the covers are the covers. We're getting 3 of them. We've seen them.
Oh yeah.
I think judging the interior art, because you'd have to go back and look at what interior art did we get fed for 5e. Was that just really, because some of the interiors are, the one thing I have heard is that there's a load more of art for a start. So like I've heard that like every single class is going to have a full page spread. We didn't have that before, and I think most subclasses are going to have art. So I think there's going to be a lot more art. Now if there is a lot more art in the books, then some of it isn't going to be great just by
no, there's no way.
Sheer volume of it. So yeah, I think right now it'd be very hard to judge. I mean, actually I've just flicked through a few bits, and the interior I'm seeing, actually some of it looks better than the cover. But
and they are doing the pre-sale now for the 3 core books plus PDFs or plus the electronic access, and that's $180 US.
I mean, this is the thing. That's the thing, like they said, it's not PDFs, it's digital access, which is just like, oh, great. I want, just go back and do PDFs. They're the only company that does, not true. Games Workshop doesn't do PDFs either for the same reasons, but so I guess they're the 2 biggest companies around. They must know what they're doing, but still, just do PDFs.
I think what's unfortunate is that D&D has the name.
Yeah.
People are gonna buy the stuff because it's called Dungeons and Dragons. People are gonna go out and buy 3 copies of each of these books because they want one they're never gonna open, and one they're gonna show people that's the limited edition, and one they're gonna use, and maybe it's ridiculous. That people are gonna do this. I think you're right. The art is not gonna draw people to Dungeons and Dragons. It may turn some people off, but it probably won't be the deciding factor. Like grouches like me who are just so unhappy with the way that WOTC, I think, frankly, has destroyed this flagship game. They're just adding insult to injury by pumping out lifeless excuses for art at this point. But I don't think it's going to turn people away.
I think it's very harsh
to be turned away.
I think it's very harsh to say. Right, here's a simple thing. You cannot say that Wizards of the Coast have destroyed D&D when it is bigger and more popular than it has ever been, and because of that, the whole hobby is.
I can say that McDonald's has destroyed hamburgers because they put out crap hamburgers. I don't care how many people eat Whoppers; they're trash.
But you can get other hamburgers, and you can get other D&D is bigger than it's ever been, and because of that, there are people that come into the thing to play D&D, and some of them then move on to other games. And okay, this isn't the best version of D&D. We don't know actually, because this might be brilliant. But okay, 5e was not the best version of D&D, although they had the nice looking books. And 4e was a miniature simulator.
Yep.
But TSR had killed it in 3rd edition. Okay,
Say
TSR.
What?
Well, when actually is 3rd edition Wizards of the Coast, or
no,
is
that's
that
Wizards? Because 3rd edition came out after Wizards. Wizards bought D&D.
So
first
third
and
again,
basic
third edition was
2nd edition was the end of TSR. Wizards
and that's
bought,
when and they
then
killed their own
3rd
game.
edition.
Yeah, so third edition was the one that lots and lots of people liked. I didn't because I didn't play it, but 2nd edition died because they oversaturated the market.
Correct.
So TSR killed D&D and then got bought by the Wizards. Most people, you played a load of people loved 3rd edition, and they must do because Pathfinder is based on 3rd edition. So,
good point.
I don't, I think 5th edition actually comes back to exactly what you said earlier. By trying to please everyone, you please nobody. That's what they did with 5th edition.
Everything.
Yeah. 5th edition was meant to be. It would be easy for new people to get into it. If you like sort of 2nd and 3rd, it goes more back to that, but not to the extent of 3rd. And, and you can play really retro things with it. And it did do a lot of that stuff. But actually, by doing that, it ended up being a bit, nah.
Yeah,
but that's because they didn't take enough new stuff in.
Where they have taken it and what they've done with it since. I think that 5th edition started off in a good place. I agree with you completely on the art, that overall, like that cover art is, we see the same thing, in my opinion, we see the same thing that started happening with 4th edition is we're trying to do too much. Do less, do it better, and instead of trying to do more or do everything, and you do it all kind of piss poorly. And unfortunately, the stuff that we're seeing now, in my opinion, in terms of the covers, is just a culmination of that like piss poor kitchen sink. Let's make sure everyone's at the table kind of thing in the look, and it does nothing.
Yeah, I basically think it doesn't matter. I think the name,
in terms of whether people are inclined to buy it or not, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to be printing one of these off as a poster and putting it on their wall, which people would do with the Elmore stuff,
Yeah,
because it's classic. But then, partly that is also nostalgia. Um,
good point.
but yeah, I think people are, D&D is a name.
Yeah,
Like, if people buy into it. I mean, I put this thing on Facebook. I messaged you yesterday. I've run D&D from people to come in and checking it out as a club thing at a school because they've heard of D&D. But
yep.
if I said we're going to play another I mean, I went into this. I went into the kids who currently run it. So these are 16, 17-year-olds. And I was like, what do you do in D&D club? Because I teach at the same time. And I can go and see, well, we play D&D. Do you play any other games? And literally 2 or 3 of them went, well, what other games?
Exactly.
Because they didn't know.
Yeah.
But once you've got your foot in the door with D&D, D&D, once you've got your foot in the door with it, you might find other stuff. It depends how you access it, because the chances are, like if you access it through Critical Role, then you will be aware there are other games because they're making their own other games. If you went on to Drive-Thru to go onto DM's Guild, you'll find that there are other games.
I think too that it's going to depend on the individual, where most people, and I think we've seen this big time with 5e. Most people who are playing 5e are more, and I don't say this in a derogatory way at all, they are more tourists within this hobby rather than like weirdos like us who have been with it since we were teenagers.
Yeah.
Most people are going to be more at the hobbyist rather than the enthusiast or fan level. And I think like you got tourists, those are the people who are going to disappear first. And then you've got like the hobby gamer, and then you've got the enthusiast, and then you've got the progressively over to the people who don't realize that none of this stuff is real. If you do have those folks who come into D&D because it's D&D and they look at the art and they don't really think like one way or another, whatever, they're at that hobbyist level, maybe just maybe you show that like, oh, here's this cover of this cool book, and they're like, whoa, that's so awesome, so much action and adventure, so much story, just reaching out from the cover and trying to grab me. Maybe they're going to move over to something else, or maybe they're going to be into D&D as a hobbyist for a summer, or a school year, and then they're going to go join the army, or they're going to go get a job or something like that, and they're just going to lose interest in the hobby, and their $200 worth of D&D umpteenth edition books are just going to sit there, or the one rather that they bought, probably the PHB, or their account with D&D whatever it's called .com will lapse. And they'll just move on from it. So this is kind of funny where we're coming to a conclusion here that I think the art's really important for people for whom the art is really important. And there are a lot of people for whom the art is really, it's like, oh, that's nice, but it's not so central because they're not the weirdo grognards that we are.
No, I mean, I think art is important, but at the end of the day, to an extent, because if you have an amazing looking book with loads of amazing art, the system or the setting is diabolical. Like Rifts, for example. It's on the article that Jeremy will share you. One of it is the page of one of the Rifts things by a really good artist who did a lot of good Rifts art. There ain't no one out there. Well, there is, the proper weirdos.
There's some.
They're telling you the original Rifts is a decent system. It's a terrible system.
Yeah.
They had great art, some super iconic pieces of art inside that as well, and the covers, but that's a terrible system.
And great line drawing, great black and white line drawings, actually throughout the Palladium series of books. But you're right, the system is horrific. Like I just mentioned, Earth Dawn, the original Earth Dawn from FASA has some incredibly evocative, because it's a very unique world, and the system is a dog.
Again, Shadowrun. Shadowrun has 5, 6 editions of decent artwork, but terrible rules still. So the art, okay, so the art is going to attract people to try something different. D&D doesn't need good art. I do find it a bit odd when I can look at this art behind me and go classic, and then look at this and go, it's not as good. And even just going back to 4th edition, but maybe this art appeals to people, because one thing you got to remember is that Wizards of the Coast will know art because they own Magic, and Magic has a lot of art. That's every couple of months they drop a new Magic set with 250 cards, and there's art on all of that. They have to know what kind of art people like. And I think with anything, when people are shouting up and down and jumping up and down the internet, the loudest voices are not necessarily the people they are selling this to. And I say
agree.
this as a Star Wars fan that has basically had to find a very particular corner of the Star Wars internet, so I don't have to have all those people that hate Star Wars because it's not. Well, again, come back to the episode I was listening to today. You literally said the prequel shouldn't exist. There should just be the original 3 films. There's a whole generation of people that the prequels are the best thing about Star Wars, and now everything that's Disney doing is Disney has ruined Star Wars. Well, as far as I was concerned in my 20s, George Lucas did that already. So there's always people that are going to hate on stuff. I don't think that the art is that bad, and I think even if it is that bad, it's really not worth getting cross about.
Well, people online want to get they want to find things to grind about. Like, I can look at it and I can have my own thoughts about it, but the idea of launching into a multi-day screed involving lots of different people whom I actually will never meet is just not worth it.
No.
That's why, like I said, I said one thing. All I said was that the new interior art makes me think that the level of like adventure in the new version of DnD will involve me rolling to see if you liked my scones, because that's what it looks like. That's the story. Do you like my scones?
No. It's all right. It's not the best D&D art, but
yeah, we'll see. So it'll be interesting, to watch how it shakes out over time as to what more comes out, and also do the books have some kind of a coherence? Is there something of a meta story or a meta feel that they evoke, or what? I don't know. I know that I won't be buying them, so I will be looking at the images online and trying to figure out. Maybe I'll page through, if no one's looking, I'll page through one of the books at a game store.
I will just throw this out there. We've spent most of the last 4 years, 3 years, whatever, talking about 2D20. The 2D20 books do not have particularly good art. Oh, except for Infinity and Bitsby. No one, it's all right.
I think Star Trek does. Star Trek's decent.
It's serviceable. It's reasonable, but it's not great. There's piece of art. Piece of art in 2D20 games aren't making me go, this is amazing, I want to play it. That is very much where the books are good and the system's good, and the settings are good, but the art is not making me go woo. On the flip side, it falls into the category of what I said already, that virtually all of their stuff is existing IP, so I don't need particularly amazing art. So yeah, some of the stuff in the Act of Cthulhu books, well, the ones where they need better art, because I think the art in Dream Machines is good. Where they need the good art, I think they do have good art. Where they don't need the good art because an existing IP, it's fine.
I think, although I'll say, I think I have one of the Dune core books, and I think that there is a very coherent feel. The art evokes a feel that if you've watched 5 minutes of Dune, you get. And I think it does a good job with it. Fallout, I think the art in it is very evocative of and overlaps very well with the video game property and the television show. Star Trek, I agree. Star Trek's good. It's good, but it also, there's a lower bar, I think, because it's such a widely known property, unless they put in trash. So it goes back, and we can end with this. It goes back to, for some people, the art's going to matter a lot, but I don't think there are that many people for whom the art matters that much. And I think this current debate is probably less about the art and more about how people feel about what the art is supposed to be for their idea of what D&D ought to be.
I mean, I can certainly look on the front cover of the Player's Handbook and see 2 reasons why people don't like that art. And if you don't know what I mean, go and look at the art. You'll see the 2 obvious reasons that people don't look.
People are going to find things to grind about.
And they will not like that.
It's actually not about the art. It's about what they're using the art to say.
Yes, it's the D&D Player's Handbook new cover is the Star Wars acolyte of Dungeons and Dragons. The complaints are nothing. The complaints are nothing to do with
story, kitchen sink, blah.
That's a legitimate complaint.
That's what I bring to the table. Legit.
That's not what people will be complaining about.
So, but that's not what we're complaining about.
They're all right. They can't all be Elmore and Reynolds. You don't even like Reynolds.
No, I don't. But I can appreciate the, what he seeks to do. He tries to tell extraordinarily busy stories with his cover art, but he tries to tell stories.
Yes. Yeah, so there we go. Art is useful. Art is if art tells a story, that's better.
Yes.
It's at the end of the day, it's not the be and end. And people probably don't buy books just for the art. Although they will not buy books because of bad art. So
yeah. Like really
I don't think these are that the D&D 2024, 25 books are not that bad. They are not so bad they're going to put people off.
No, I agree. The people who are already inclined to purchase it. I'm going to say two things in closing, for me at least. One, I'll put the link to the article that you found with this list of artists, like the top 10 supposedly from this person. I think they're worth looking into. And I'll also mention, and I'll put a link to this on Amazon Prime. There's a documentary called The Eye of the Beholder, and it's the art of Dungeons and Dragons, and it focuses on the four big, like the four horsemen of the original TSR art room. And it's excellent. You want to see some really great art and hear some interesting stories about how the most, like Elmore's one of them, Keith Parkinson, Brahm is on there. Ooh. These folks who did, just like I said, really iconic story evoking art. The interviews are really interesting, and the art that you see in the documentary is really worth looking at.
Yeah, I can't believe you didn't mention Brahm. I mean, it's a perfect example of where like the entirety of Dark Sun, second edition, it's Brahm. His art makes that game.
That was the only TSR line that was one artist, and the idea was like, we're going to make this so cohesive. And the only way we're going to do that is with one artist, because it's such a singular look and feel.
Yes,
Dark Sun's not Dark Sun without his stuff.
I know, unfortunately, that is true. So, you realize who the main line artist of Eberron that was, though, right?
You're probably going to say it's Wayne Reynolds.
It was Wayne Reynolds.
Yeah, and I'll be perfectly honest and say that overall I wasn't super thrilled. I got what the Eberron art was trying to do, but the style really was never my. I love the setting, but the style. Was it
because the Warforged had buckles?
Oh, they had buckles. That's right. Pilgrim chic, Pilgrim adventurer chic.
Classic.
All right. So if you have thoughts about art, you should share it with us. If you know of other artists that you think are really great in this space, if you're an artist, comment, share, comment, join the Discord. Tell us what you think. Tell us why we suck. Yeah. Tell us why we don't suck. Things like that.
Like and subscribe. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.